What is FMLA? What is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act? How can employers support parents, especially birthing mothers, before and after welcoming a baby to their family? In this episode, two talented HR pros and mothers weigh in with personal experience and professional advice.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com. Welcome everyone. We've got a really exciting conversation, but I want to start out with a statistic. According to a recent study by Glassdoor, about 40% of the US workforce are parents with a child age 18 or under at home. Raising children is not just a lifestyle choice, it is also key to the stability of communities, economies, and countries. Today, we're joined by two talented women to discuss how companies can better support parents before and after welcoming a son or daughter into their family. Thanks for joining us, Kristina and Mickelle.
Thanks for having us.
So let's hear a little bit more about Kristina and Mickelle. So Kristina Peterson is a regional vice president at Nexeo HR, a dynamic full-service recruiting and staffing solutions firm. She originally opened the Logan, Utah branch in 2012, where she currently leads operations. Prior to working at Nexeo, Kristina held the role of national and international account rep and marketing coordinator for J.J. Cole Collections, a boutique juvenile products brand. Kristina received her bachelor's degree from the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University in 2011 and continues to cheer on the Aggies to this day. And for those who listen with us, you know we're Aggies fans too. She's so happy to be living and raising her family in Cache Valley, Utah, surrounded by friends and family. So thanks for coming, Kristina. And we'll hear also about Mickelle. So Mickelle Anderson is a human resources professional at Space Dynamics Laboratory, a nonprofit government contractor owned by Utah State University that builds satellites, sensors, and more. Mickelle received both her undergraduate and graduate degrees in human resource management from Utah State University and a professional in human resources certification from the Human Resource Certification Institute. With over a decade of experience in talent acquisition, compliance, and compensation, she has conducted hundreds of interviews, has updated and written numerous company-wide policies and procedures, and has presented classes on various HR topics. Outside the office, she enjoys lifting weights, reading, music, eating Mexican food, and spending time with her husband and 3 kids. So good to have both of you here, and fellow USU alumni. We're so excited to learn from you. And actually, I've had the opportunity to learn from both of them at different presentations for our local SHRM chapter. So thank you so much for being here. We're excited to have you guys and learn more from you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
As am I. We appreciate the opportunity.
Well, fantastic. So this is, our first episode we've ever done that has, 4 of us having a conversation. And so we're excited to have, a little bit more dynamic to the conversation. We've got a few really awesome questions that I know everyone listening is going to get some value from to help you navigate supporting parents better in the workforce. So let's start off the conversation. Mickelle, tell us a little bit about FMLA leave for people who don't really know what that is. What does it provide and not provide working moms? Let's kind of start the ground conversation there of like bare minimums of what the government requires you to do.
And before we go into that, I just wanted to mention, Mickelle, she has 3 kids. She's been through the experience of having kids while working, and same with Kristina. And Kristina's actually pregnant right now. And I actually just had a baby a month ago. And so we're all kind of in this right now. And so it's very relevant. And so, yeah, let's get into the FMLA and learn about that.
I appreciate that. Yes, we've all are in or have been in the trenches with all of this. So
Yes.
we have professional and personal experience with it for sure. But yes, let me dive in. So FMLA stands for the Family and Medical Leave Act, and it provides eligible employees in the United States with job protected unpaid leave for certain family and medical conditions. So the birth of a new baby would fall under this act. What the FMLA offers working parents, well, let's first of all talk about who it applies to. So it applies to mothers, fathers, adoptive parents, and even foster parents equally if the eligibility criteria is met. It allows for up to 12 weeks of leave over a 12-month period for the birth or adoption of a child. And this would include the recovery time for our birth mamas. You are able to use the FMLA leave intermittently or on a reduced schedule if it's medically necessary or agreed upon by your employer. So in the instance, for example, you have a child who has a medical condition that requires them to stay in the NICU for a little bit, you could utilize FMLA to kind of take more of an intermittent leave so you don't have to use it all right after the fact. One other thing to mention that it provides is it provides job protection. So employees are guaranteed to return to their same or equivalent position after the leave ends. So that's what it provides. What it doesn't provide. So FMLA itself is unpaid, although employers may allow the parents to use sick leave or vacation pay concurrently with it. It's not seen as a direct wage replacement. So kind of along that same line, it does not guarantee parental or maternity leave. That's really up to your employer and what policies they have for parental or maternity leave or the state that you live in as well. So unpaid only at the federal level is what FMLA provides.
Fantastic. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it only is legally required by employers with 50 employees or more. Is that correct? Okay. So like
Correct.
a startup, you've got 12 employees. There is no FMLA, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it definitely is not required. I am a big advocate of doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
100%. Yeah.
But yes, from a federal legal perspective, if you have 50 or under, you're not obligated to do it, to follow it.
Okay. Cool.
That would have been so nice to know with our second child. She was in the NICU for a week and there went his paternity leave. So that's really good to know. So what is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and when might that become law?
Yeah, so this is a newer law that has gone into place. So let me kind of first introduce it a little bit. So the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, or what's known as PWFA, requires employers who have at least 15 employees or more to provide reasonable accommodations for employees that are pregnant or have recently had a baby through the birth of a child or any related medical conditions, as long as it doesn't impose any kind of undue hardship to the company. So accommodations could involve like scheduling changes. I think about women who suffer from morning sickness, for example. This could be an accommodation that they could go to their employer and say, hey, I'm really struggling in the mornings with severe morning sickness. Could you flex my schedule while I get through this first trimester or however long your morning sickness lasts for? Another example could be like equipment modification. So near the end of your pregnancy, things get pretty uncomfortable, and maybe you need a standing desk, or maybe you need a more comfortable chair to help you sit for longer periods of times. Anything like light duty assignments. So if you have to lift things regularly, you could ask for an accommodation to have somebody else help you during that time. And then of course, more frequent breaks too. So if you need to stand up or stretch or do anything that helps your body feel good during that time, those could all be seen as accommodations under this new law. This law also prohibits employers from denying or promotions to women who need pregnancy accommodations. As long as women can perform the essential tasks of the job, they should be eligible for those promotions or job opportunities as well. And then in terms of it going into effect, so at the end of 2022, President Biden actually signed the PWFA into law. And on June 27th of this year, that law became effective. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, who enforces this PWFA, they actually started accepting charges of discrimination claims the day that it became effective. So the law is in effect, has been since June, but we are still waiting on the EEOC to publish the regulations or the ruling on the law. So basically what that means is that agency takes the law, they interpret the new law, and then they provide some detailed examples to employers on how they can better understand the new law, what their obligations are, and then ultimately how they can best comply with it. So waiting on the rule, but the law is in effect.
Okay. Wow. That's some incredibly important information. And I would say for anyone listening, go look up a recent news article from the time that this has been recorded to anything that's more recent when you're listening to this recording. So very important and relevant information. Thank you, Mickelle. So Kristina, let's come over to you now. We know you have a lot of wisdom and experience from your lived experience, both being an HR professional and a mom. So first question for you, if you could go back in time before having your first child, what would you have done differently?
All righty. Well, I have thought about this and had to think back to almost a decade ago now. And I really had one main thing come to mind, and I was a little hesitant to share it at first, but then I decided, hey, I bet I'm not the only one that's in this boat. So I am going to share it. And in short, I wish I would have been a better advocate for myself. And I think this is so important, not only in your professional life, but you're going to see you need to do that all along the way through your medical journey with your children, period, and raising them. But I work for Nexeo. I worked for Nexeo then as well. Great company, but we were a lot smaller and younger then. And just like Mickelle mentioned, companies under 50, aren't held to some of the same standards as some over 50. And I think in conjunction with that as well, you may more commonly see less official policies or procedures and processes in place with these smaller businesses. Well, almost half of the US workforce works for a smaller business. And so I don't think I'm the only one in this boat, but I really could have done a better job to work with my company to make a plan for when I would be out on maternity. So I think some of these, bigger companies might already have these processes in place that they'd go down a line in making a plan and organizing what's going to happen. But that's something that I would have changed, because I ended up going back to work about a week after I had my baby. And luckily my company was great and they let me do it from home and were really flexible that way. But I had opened a branch just a few years prior, so we were pretty small as far as the support that I had locally. And I'll still always remember, someone from my management team must have come up here because they got me a physical, very generous gift card to one of the local baby stores. So they were really accepting and excited and supported that way. But where there was some lack was just in the planning and preparation of coverage while I was out. And, I'd love to have, I think, some of that time back if I were to do it all over again. But other than that, I'm really proud of how we went about preparing our lives. I think that's a whole nother conversation. Having a baby is more to me than just an emotional decision. I wouldn't go out on a whim and just buy a house. That's a life-changing decision. And I think a baby is even more so than that.
Yeah.
You're gonna have them for the rest of, probably your lives. And so there's a lot that needs to be accounted for to get your lives in a good space so that you are prepared and ready financially and, personally to have that big change happen in your life.
I think that's really good perspective to have. And those of us who have had a baby and even not, like, those newborns are so precious, and the time goes by so fast, and you want to enjoy it while it lasts. And you're right, it's the biggest decision to have a child. And so with that perspective in mind, do you have any advice for individuals, before your baby comes? I know you have had a lot of morning sickness with your pregnancy. You were mentioning that. And then also while you're on your parental leave, and then how to transition back into working.
Yeah, absolutely. Before the baby comes, be excited and try not to have much guilt. I think we hear a lot about, mom guilt, and that almost comes whether you welcome it or not. But I've experienced this, and a lot of my answers are advice to myself in my time now, as well as with my prior pregnancies. And so I think try not to have too much guilt, but it isn't uncommon, because you do know that that burden of your absence is going to be passed off to your coworkers. And so that's a hard thing to swallow. But I think it's a big life event, and get ready and be excited. I would say nest at home as well as at work. We hear this term nesting, which means you're really getting prepared and ready for this huge change that's about to occur in your life. And I think not only do you need to do it personally and at home in preparation for the baby and making space and making accommodations and adjustments and plans, but also at work. What's your coverage going to look like? How do you want it to look? How do you want it to happen? I mean, even yesterday I was updating some notes, really with the intent and thought of, I'm going to be out for some time, so I need things to move smoothly. And so I need to help my team and my coworkers be prepared to have the information in front of them that they need in order to make that happen. And then as far as while being on parental leave, once again, and advice to myself, because I am one to always be entrenched in my work, but really enjoy that time and try to disconnect as much as possible, because you're not going to get it back. And it is a big life change, whether it's your first or second, third, or beyond that. There always is an adjustment period, and I think it's important to be there and be present in everything you do. And then I know the last question you asked was, after returning to work, any specific advice? And this one might be a little bit of a soapbox for me, but if I were to give advice to anyone, I would say, first off, do return to work. I think you can have a lot of preconceived notions about what things are going to look, how they're going to be, or what they're going to look like after you have your baby. And I think it's so important for women to give themselves the experience and opportunity to know what it's like to be a working mom. And that way you have context, whether you decide to then be a stay-at-home mom, look for different work or ask for an adjusted schedule or return full-time. I think context is so important. It helps us to be grateful for what we have and to make the best decisions for ourselves personally, professionally, and our families.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was wondering, Mickelle, if you have anything to add to what she said, just with your own experiences, your perspectives.
Oh my goodness, that was so well said, Kristina. I just, a couple of thoughts came to my mind when you were talking. I can so relate to the guilt that you were talking about. You shouldn't feel guilty about having a baby, right? It's a very exciting thing. It's a very natural thing to want to grow your family, but there is that stress of, oh my goodness, I'm going to overburden my work colleagues when I'm gone, and they're going to have to take all of this on. But yeah, my biggest advice would be, don't feel like you have to apologize for having a baby. Do your prep work ahead of time, work on documenting the work that you do, write procedures for those things, so that when you do have the baby, hopefully you feel a little less guilt in that you've prepared yourself and your team as much as possible in order to help alleviate some of that guilt that you may have. It never really fully goes away, especially when you know it's a busy time in the office. But I think doing as much as you can to prep ahead of time, I have found helped me a lot with that guilt. And then just to echo what Kristina said, after that baby comes, just soak it all in. You know, enlist is one of those things where you hear this advice a lot as a new parent, especially with your first baby, like, oh, the time goes by so fast. And at the time you're like, oh, okay. But actually having 3 kids now, it's like I blinked and my oldest is 8 now. And I just feel like it flew by. And that advice was so true, even though at the time I couldn't fully appreciate it. But they are just so little for such a short time, and you want your head to be in the present, just enjoying those baby snuggles, taking care of yourself. Having a baby is not easy in terms of just recovery, and then you have on top of that to take care of a new baby and you're sleep deprived, and then if you have other children at home, it's a lot. You need to allow yourself to take a step back and recover physically and mentally, and just to enjoy those time with your kids. And then your last question, like advice for coming back. I'm with Kristina. I have a soapbox, but we could probably have a whole other episode about this. But my biggest thing would be have patience and have grace with yourself. You're not the same person that you were before you had that baby. Even after having 3 kids, you're now a mom of 3 versus a mom of 2. It's an adjustment, or at least for me, I found it to be an adjustment every single time I came back, because I came back with all 3 of my kids. I thought that it would be easier. It wasn't. It was hard every time, albeit I had a little bit more understanding of what to expect going into it the second and third time, but it didn't make it any easier. It was still really hard. My heart was in both places. So I just advise, just have grace and have patience with yourself. It's an adjustment. Your employers, your supervisors, they hopefully understand that. And if they don't, this is your opportunity to advocate for yourself and to educate your employer on what you desire, what you want, what you expect as you come back in. And it's okay to ask for those things as well.
Yeah, and I think a good employer will be understanding. Maybe they're, not familiar with what that experience is like, or maybe they are, but when you help communicate that to them, I think an understanding employer will, be an advocate for you at that point. And obviously, just from both of you, what you were saying about your experiences, it's obvious that you care about your work and that you want to be reliable and prepare your employer the best that you're able to. And I think it goes both ways, right? So your employer helping you transition to that, and you helping them transition to it as well, as best as you can. And it's also an adjustment for the kids that you already have at home, for them to get a new sibling, right? So it's a big life event. I love everything you guys said. Great advice. And then we want to end on this question. You've led some program creation efforts at SDL, Mickelle. So can you tell us about them for other companies that may be looking to enhance how they support working parents?
Absolutely. So I don't want to paint my company in like we are perfect, because no company is. And how this all started was actually due to an employee who came forward. She had a baby and was pumping, and was just really discouraged and disappointed in the state of our mother's rooms. And I actually had just shortly come off of maternity leave with my last baby when this had happened. And I said, take me there, show me where do you go and pump? And she proceeded to take me into this location where it was the saddest thing. It was so embarrassing. It was this locker room that had this chair that was just like facing the other, like the opposite way of the door. And that was it. It was really embarrassing. I felt for her deeply as someone who was also pumping at the time. I was just heartbroken that we had put her into this kind of situation, and knew that we needed to take immediate action to improve these spaces. And so what I did is I walked around our entire campus and just looked at the state of what our mothers' rooms were in. There wasn't a lot of them, and they were just severely lacking in essentials that I would say essentials that I think any mom needs for pumping. And so I went back to my boss and I said, we really need to make some changes to these spaces, and we need to add more spaces. And so I ended up creating a budget, got that approved, and we were able to completely overhaul all of our mothers' rooms to where they all have a chair, a table, cleaning supplies. Some of them even have sinks in them now. We have sound machines, mirrors, because after you pump, you got to make sure everything's back and where it needs to be in place. And we also allocated budget to decorate them too, because we wanted for these spaces to be not only functional but comfortable as well. And that initiative took on a second phase where it was like, okay, now we have these beautiful spaces for our pumping mamas to go to when they need to pump. But do our employees in general, both men and women, and our supervisors, do they know how to best handle when their employee comes to them and tells them that they're expecting? And so that led to phase 2 of this project, where we ended up creating these resource guides that basically walked through, like, hey, you're a mom to be. Here's 4 different phases of things that we want you to think about and consider as you go through your expecting a baby experience. So it's like, how do you announce it? And then, okay, once you've announced it during your pregnancy, what are some things we would suggest that you do as you prepare to go out on leave? And then we talk about, okay, the big events arrived, you have your baby. Here's what we recommend, make sure you get them on your insurance plan. And then we actually do say in there, disconnect, enjoy that time with your baby. And then we even have advice for returning to work. So we've created documents for both moms and dads in those situations. And then we also created a supervisor training for it, because supervisors, I believe, for the most part, are well-intended. They want to do right by their employees, but they don't often know how to best approach it. I work for a STEM company. We have a lot of engineers. Historically, and or I should say stereotypically, are not known for being like strong communicators or knowing best how to handle these things all the time. Bless them, they're awesome, but just they don't have a lot of experience with it. And so we created a conversation checklist for them. So if they have an employee that says, I'm expecting, they don't have a foot in the mouth moment, or they actually have almost like a script to say, oh, this is awesome, congratulations, let's talk through a few things. And so we created that for them as well. So really, really proud of this initiative. It needed to be done, and it took a really brave employee coming forward and saying, hey, this doesn't feel right. And because of her, we were able to make these huge necessary changes, and it's something that we're now really proud of and are grateful that we're able to provide for our employees.
I love that. I think that reiterates what we were talking about earlier, just that it's a two-sided thing. It's both in the hands of the employer and in the hands of the woman who's pregnant or has had the child. And that communication between the two is super important. And you don't want the mom just being silent bystander and dealing with pumping in a teeny locker room or whatever. And the employer would want to know about that, and make it right and make it better for anybody who needs that better experience, And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, it just comes down to that communication with both sides. Sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, no, I agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, having a baby and coming back to work, it's a very vulnerable time. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity for employers, if you don't try to make it as best of an experience as you can. I mean, you may have some parents who are like super excited to come back and they're ready to kind of have that side of themselves, that intrinsic side of them that enjoys that working. They may be excited, and you might have other parents who are just having a really hard time and are struggling. And that's okay. And I think it's just important for supervisors and employers to say, we're so glad that you're back. It's okay if you're having a hard time with it. We're here to support you. We're here to welcome you back, get you up to speed at the pace that you need to, and make this as easy of a transition as we can, knowing that your heart may not be here right now, and that's okay.
And such a great idea to have those documents in place to help make that transition more seamless. And honestly, any employer would want to make things great for both of you. You guys are so reliable, so knowledgeable, and it was so great to have both of you on here sharing your experiences, both in the workplace, at home, and with those transitions. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and perspectives with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add one last comment, like from the dad perspective. It's a big change for fathers as well, both for welcoming that baby and also supporting your wife who just delivered this child and is also physically recovering and supporting them. And so it's a big thing for everyone involved. I love that Space Dynamics laboratory also considered the supervisor as one of those key individuals in that before, during, and after plan. So those 3 different plans for the key individuals in that life-changing situation: mothers, dads, and supervisors. And thank you for this time.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone listening. Definitely follow Mickelle and Kristina on LinkedIn. We'll include the links to their profiles. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you both.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit podcast and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mowbray.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mowbray.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.